friends, welcome to Viewpoint from Overseas. I am your host, Misbah Azam. Today I have a special guest with me. I have with me Dr. Nyla Ali Khan. Nyla is a native Kashmiri and a native speaker of Kashmiri language. Nyla is author of 4 critically acclaimed books, including The Fiction of Nationality and Era of Transnationalism, in which she critiques the nostalgic support of subversive elements by the affluent diasporas of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. In her second book, Islam, Women, and Violence in Kashmir, Between India and Pakistan, she examined the seminal spiritual and political role of women in Kashmir, while also highlighting the plight of Kashmir generally as the gnarled bone of contention between India and Pakistan. This monograph is now used as the teaching text in several universities because of the growing interest in Kashmir. Most recently, Nyla have edited a major anthology, The Parchment of Kashmir, History, Society and Polity, which develops an unparalleled understanding of the region's culture, resilience, and the fate as political pawn. Several reviews of that anthology have appeared in academic journals. Her fourth book, which is a hybrid form of academic memoir and biography on her maternal grandmother, Begum Akbar Jahan Abdullah, was released in June 2014 and is critically acclaimed as well. She visits Kashmir frequently and have recently been active in giving lectures on the subject of Kashmir at the University of Oregon, Maryland, California, Washington, D.C., and New York. Nyla's goal is to engage in reflective action as an educator working with diverse cultural and social groups, questioning the exclusivity of cultural nationalism, the erosion of cultural syncretism, the ever-increasing dominance of religious fundamentalism, and the irrational resistance to cultural and linguistic differences. Nyla was also made a member of Advisory Council of Oklahoma Commission on the Status of Women. Nyla is also a granddaughter of Jammu and Kashmir's second Prime Minister, Mr. Sheikh Abdullah. So Nyla, welcome to Viewpoint from Overseas. Let us get to the real question I would like to ask you. Kashmir, Nyla, the time I grew up in Pakistan, I have been hearing about Kashmir. And then as I grew up, I saw the people who are not Kashmiris, not Indian, not Pakistanis, people like Joseph Corbell, Madeleine Albright's father. He wrote a book, Dangers in Kashmir. And I have been overwhelmed by these Kashmir literature, Victoria Schofield's Kashmir in Conflict, very famous book. Just tell me, where do we stand? There were 565 states that time, at the time of partition, like when India and Pakistan was distributed. Why Kashmir was the only one, so many problems there?
Well, Kashmir, like other princely states in 1947, was given the choice to accede either to India or to Pakistan. At the time, as you know, Jammu and Kashmir, the former princely state of Jammu and Kashmir, as well as the current state, is very diverse, culturally, linguistically, and ethnically. It was just as diverse in 1947. Because Jammu and Kashmir is a conglomerate. It is a state that was created or constructed by Dogra Maharajas through various provisions, treaties, etc. So in 1947, the Muslims of the Kashmir Valley and the people of Jammu did not agree politically or culturally. And at the time, there were several politicians, as well as a segment of our population, that felt that accession to India would ensure their socio-economic rights. Because in 1947, most Kashmiri Muslims of the valley were landless tillers or peasants who worked for wealthy landlords, most of whom were Dogra Hindus. And at the time, there was an indigenous political movement in Kashmir that grew in opposition to the Dogra monarchy. And that indigenous political movement was not religious in nature, but it had a socio-economic hue. So that collective opposition of Kashmiri Muslims to the Dogra monarch led to the growth of a political movement that relinquished the narrow limitations of religion. It was not a communal movement. It could not be seen merely through a religious lens, but it was a movement that stressed, that emphasized socio-economic reform, right?
Yes.
And now the Muslims of Jammu were better off than the Muslims of the Kashmir Valley. Most Muslims of Jammu, unlike the Muslims of the Kashmir Valley, were not disenfranchised, were not landless peasants. They were not as disillusioned or as disempowered as the Muslims of the Valley. And quite a few of them have been incorporated into the Dogra Maharaja's army. So there was a divide, a political divide, right? And the Hindus of Jammu were in alliance with the Dogra Maharaja and felt that their economic interests, as well as their political interests, would be better protected by the Maharaja. Now, in 1947, while the Maharaja of Kashmir, Hari Singh, was in limbo, he had not decided whether he wanted to accede to India or Pakistan, there was a tribal invasion.
By the tribal areas from Pakistan, right?
The tribal invasion was led by armed tribal invaders who were not state actors. They were not military men. They were militia. But they were supported, abetted by the Pakistani military. Now, there is that the topic of the tribal invasion is highly debatable, and it's controversial as well, with some people asserting that the tribal invaders came or wanted to land in Kashmir in support of the Muslims of Jammu, who were being persecuted and massacred by the Dogra army at the time, which was a kind of retaliation to what was going on in the rest of the subcontinent. As you know, in 1947, during the era of the partition, the entire Indian subcontinent was engulfed in communal flames. You are aware of that. So, in retaliation to that conflagration, and in retaliation to the massacre of Hindus in other parts of the subcontinent, Muslims in Jammu were massacred, in Poonch as well.
Poonch.
And it was also in retaliation to the growing opposition to the Dogra Maharaja. So, according to one school of thought, the tribal invaders landed in support of the Muslims of Jammu and Pooch. But according to another school of thought, the tribal invaders tried to invade the state of Jammu and Kashmir so that their will could be imposed on the populace of Jammu and Kashmir. Instead of allowing the populace of Jammu and Kashmir the choice or the ability to decide which dominion they wanted to accede to. Now, according to me, and this is, some people might disagree with my school.
Of course, yeah,
but
that's okay.
My position is that if the tribal invaders had wanted to rescue the Muslims of Jammu and Pooch, they should have tried to enter the state of Jammu and Kashmir through Suchetgarh, not through Muzaffarabad and Baramulla. It makes no sense at all to me that they tried to enter the state through Muzaffarabad and Baramulla, and on the way to Srinagar, in Muzaffarabad as well as Baramulla, the tribal invaders were responsible for pillage, plunder. They were responsible for killings, as well as the violation of women who were their co-religionists. Baramulla at the time was predominantly Muslim. And they were responsible for loot, plunder and pillage in Muzaffarabad and in Baramulla as well. And you will find several witnesses, even today, of the atrocities that occurred during the tribal invasion. Now, a couple of years ago, I read Sardar Ibrahim's book, Kashmir Saga, in which he writes about his complicity with the tribal invaders. And he writes about how he supported the tribal invasion. But even Sardar Ibrahim, in his book Kashmir Saga, is highly critical of the atrocities inflicted by the tribal invaders on the people of Muzaffarabad and Baramulla. So there are several people in Pakistan, including former military men, so former generals, colonels, etc., who have written very categorically and have condemned as well the means and methods employed by the tribal invaders that led to their defeat.
So basically what you are saying that is the initiation of the whole conflict. However, I was reading the autobiography of Mr. Kuldeep Nair. What he is saying that when first time that the Congress leadership was told about the state of Kashmir, that if they want to take it or not or something like that, there is some letter going on, I don't remember exactly what. Then Vallabhji Patel, Sardar Patel, he said that we already have too many problems. Why you guys are imposing Kashmir on our heads? Then the first standstill agreement, which Hari Singh signed, it's not with Indian government, but with to be Pakistani government, With all these things, why Pakistan, you think, in your opinion, of course, why Pakistan needs to use the tribal people to go take over the Kashmir when the people were already supported? And Victoria Schofield, according to her, that Lord Mountbatten thought that initially we should let India take over Kashmir and then we will do the referendum after that and fix that, but after this invasion occurred. So why Pakistan has to do it, in your opinion, Nyla?
All right, you're absolutely correct that Maharaja Hari Singh had signed a standstill agreement with Pakistan. The government of India at the time did not agree to sign a standstill agreement with the Maharaja. The tribal invasion was a clear breach of the standstill agreement because that was the period when the Maharaja, as I said, still hadn't decided which dominion he wanted to accede to. And things were in limbo in Jammu and Kashmir at the time. Now, there are several theories about the tribal invasion. According to K.H. Khurshid, who became the president of Azad Kashmir and who was the personal secretary of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, according to him, the responsibility for the tribal invasion lies on the shoulders of Liaquat Ali Khan and the chief minister of the Northwest Frontier Province. And Muhammad Ali Jinnah did not know anything at all, was oblivious to what had been planned by Liaquat Ali Khan and Abdullah. And the responsibility lay on their shoulders because they wanted to, and this is what K.H. Khurshid says.
Okay.
Went on to become president. He was Kashmiri speaking, worked very closely with Muhammad Ali Jinnah, then went on to become the president, was later imprisoned, ousted and imprisoned by Ayub Khan when Ayub Khan became president.
Yeah.
And after that, Khurshid went into political paralysis. You see, in Kashmir, before partition, the two most prominent political parties were the Muslim Conference and the National Conference. The Muslim Conference came into existence in 1931. The National Conference came into existence in 1938. Right?
Yeah.
And initially, the political movement in Kashmir that was an indigenous one and that led to a mass mobilization employed the idea of a Muslim identity to bring people together. So the political mobilization in Kashmir that began in 1931, that was opposed to the rule of the Dogra Maharaja Hari Singh, relied on a Muslim identity as a rallying point. Later, in the late 1930s, that movement became more inclusive.
That's true.
It included Kashmiri Pandits as well as the people of Jammu. Now, in the Kashmir Valley, the Quit Kashmir movement that began in 1946, that was analogous to the Quit India movement, the Quit Kashmir movement worked to get rid of monarchy. The Quit Kashmir movement worked to empower and enfranchise Kashmiri Muslim peasants, to bring them out of the morass of illiteracy and poverty. So it was a movement that was more effective in the Kashmir Valley, not in the rest of the state. And it was a movement that sought to create responsible government, with or without the Maharaja. Right?
Yeah.
Whereas the Muslim Conference recognized the sovereign authority of Maharaja Hari Singh. The Muslim Conference did not support the Quit Kashmir movement. The League did not support the Quit Kashmir movement. The Muslim Conference emphasized that the ultimate decision about the fate of Jammu and Kashmir rested on Maharaja Hari Singh, and they were willing to go with whatever deal he made. Whereas for the Quit Kashmir movement, the sovereign authority of Maharaja Hari Singh was highly questionable. And Muhammad Ali Jinnah at the time, his Muslim League, saw the Quit Kashmir movement as a populist movement that, in their opinion, did not have legitimacy. It was a populist movement that the Muslim League was not willing to recognize. But again, it's very, very important to see, Misbah, that in 1950, soon after partition, this movement of mass mobilization was merged with the ratification of the Land to the Tiller Bill. The Land to the Tiller Bill was passed in 1950, and that led to the enfranchisement of 700,000 landless peasants. So overnight, 700,000 landless peasants became proprietors of the lands that they tilled. And that 700,000 did not include only the Muslims of the Kashmir Valley, but it also included 200,000 lower caste Hindus of Jammu. So it was a movement that was progressive, that emphasized socio-economic transformation. You see?
Yeah.
And at the time, the politics of the Congress Party, I'm talking about the late 1940s and the early 1950s, the politics of the Congress Party was socialist in nature, as opposed to the politics of the Muslim League. The Muslim League and the Muslim Conference as well comprised primarily feudal lords, comprised primarily the Muslim elite, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the Congress Party at the time was socialist, was opposed to monarchy, was opposed to feudalism as well. And these socio-economic reforms, these land reforms, were rigorously implemented in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So rigorously implemented that overnight, with the stroke of the pen, we had the creation of a new middle class. We had the growth of urbanization. We had mass education up to the university level. It was free up to the university level for the populace of Kashmir, particularly the rural populace that moved to urban areas once they gained right over lands that they had been tilling for generations, for centuries. So it was greatly empowering.
Yeah.
But later, particularly in 1953 and post-1953, the Congress Party in India sought to appease the religious right in the rest of the country. And Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel was quite rigid and quite bigoted as well in his politics. And the Congress Party sought to appease such elements. So unfortunately, they jumped on the bandwagon of soft Hindutva. And the secularism became a veneer that was not as well protected, that was not as well reinforced, that was not a credo, the way the people of Kashmir had thought it would be in the Indian Dominion. So majoritarianism, the majoritarianism that the people of Kashmir feared in the newly created Dominion of Pakistan, was mirrored in the Dominion of India. Because of the Congress Party jumping on the bandwagon of soft Hindutva.
I see.
Right?
Yeah. So Nyla, let's move to the current situation now, and how you see the current situation. A lot of violence in the Kashmir Valley, and how you see it going down, and there will be a peace.
So, Ms. Mata, I think Kashmir has been used as a bargaining chip for India and Pakistan for a long time. I think the youth of Kashmir is being used as cannon fodder, and that has to stop. Because we are on the verge of losing one more generation because of the militarization and the mushrooming of militant organizations in Kashmir as well. I think violence is a Frankenstein monster that ends up destroying those who support it, those who espouse it. The problem in Kashmir is that the military, which should be restricted to borders, is now intervening in political and civilian institutions. Something that has been going on in Pakistan for a long time. Pakistan has seen several military dictatorships. It's seen several military coups. It's seen the interference of the military in political and civilian institutions for a long, long time. But we are witnessing that in Kashmir as well now. You see, and according to me, the forte of the military is borders. The forte of the military is not political institutions. It is not civilian institutions. And political processes get nipped in the bud when the military calls the shots in civilian spaces. We need a strengthening, we need a revival of grassroots institutions and organizations. We need a revival of democratic institutions. We need a revival of civil society organizations so that our politics, so that our nationalist identity, which emerged in the 1930s for Kashmir, that nationalist identity must redevelop organically and at the grassroots level. Right?
Yeah.
But right now, what I see is that political space being usurped by the nation states of both India and Pakistan.
Yeah.
I see that political space being greatly militarized, as a result of which there is no genuine indigenous political growth.
Yeah, actually, but there is very interesting thing. If you see, and it is your choice how you see that, because whenever Pakistan has a military government, they made lot of progress with India on Kashmir. Just recently, General Musharraf's case. Of course, you and I can argue that Pakistan military wants to take over this issue and wants to resolve. But once it is happening in India side, it is when India is Indian military is taking over the situation. It is going worse and worse every day. How you see that? I mean, and second question also, I will add it with that under the circumstances which we see nowadays, the geopolitical situation where India's importance is increased and all, why India would ever go and sit with Pakistan or even Kashmiris to resolve the issue? It was not 1974 when Indira Gandhi sat with Mr. Sheikh Abdullah and they came up with something, but how it is going to work now in this situation?
I think those are very good questions, Misbah. You are absolutely right that India and Pakistan had made some progress vis-a-vis Kashmir during the tenure of General Musharraf and Prime Minister Vajpayee. At the time, there was some composite dialogue. There was some negotiation. And Musharraf, former President Musharraf and former Prime Minister Vajpayee came up with the 4-point formula. So they were seriously considering joint control of the erstwhile princely state, and they were considering gradual demilitarization as well as the gradual granting of autonomy, not complete independence, but autonomy to the various provinces and districts of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And they were also looking at joint control of some arenas. So that was a step in the right direction, but unfortunately, because of the political turmoil and volatile political situation in Pakistan, and then the changing situation in India as well, the 4-point formula did not go any further than that. Musharraf's government is seen by several analysts as a benevolent dictatorship. And those political analysts believe that sometimes a lot more progress is made in a benevolent dictatorship than is made in a democratic. I think for India and Pakistan to resolve Kashmir, the two of them need to consider the changing geopolitical situation the world over. The two of them need to consider their strengths and growths, not just as nuclear powers, but particularly for India, as a burgeoning economic power as well, as you pointed out. And the United States of America right now is working very hard to build alliances and to forge relations with India in order to offset the growth of China. The United States currently is very supportive of India so that that becomes a power in the Asia-Pacific region and is able to compete with China. India has the reputation of being the largest democracy in the world. India has to live up to that reputation. India has to protect its image. Kashmir has been treated as merely a dissident, insurgent state for far too long. In the international community, I'm sure India wants to be recognized not just for its military prowess or its economic growth, but for its democratic credentials as well. It wants to protect its reputation as a power that believes in diplomacy and negotiations, as opposed to belligerence, as opposed to oppression, as opposed to a power that violates the human rights of the populace of one of its own states in order to curb dissent. So in order to protect that image, in order to protect that reputation, India would need to stress, would need to emphasize democratic means, dialogue and negotiation. Before talking to Pakistan, before negotiating with Pakistan, there needs to be an internal political dialogue between Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, and the federal Indian government. And in order for that to occur, Misbah, we need consensus building in the state of Jammu and Kashmir as well. Because right now, it's not like there is one collective political opinion in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Our own state is terribly fragmented, politically as well as in other ways. We have mainstream political organizations, we have separatist political organizations, we have independent political organizations that toe their own line, that nurture an independent political ideology. All those parties, all those stakeholders within the state of Jammu and Kashmir need to come together, need to talk to one another, need to build consensus among themselves. We have the Kashmir Valley, we have Jammu Province, we have Ladakh, and unfortunately, right now, what we are seeing is an exacerbation of regional divides as well as communal divides in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So there needs to be a process of bridge building, consensus building within the state, then an internal dialogue between the state of Jammu and Kashmir and the federal government of India. And I think a viable way to begin would be to negotiate with the government of India for more autonomy for the state, more autonomous powers, like we did when we acceded to the Indian Dominion in 1947. We need a resuscitation of that kind of autonomy. And then India and Pakistan can sit down together and talk about, hopefully, creating the state of Jammu and Kashmir as a bridge between the two nation states, a bridge that would enable cross-border economic, cultural, political growth that would bridge the ideological divide between India and Pakistan. You see, India is currently, yes, you're right, India has grown militarily. India has grown economically. But even within India, there are several political fissures. There is the growth of right-wing politics. On the other hand, you still have civil society organizations and groups in India that are highly critical of that right-wing politics. Recently, elections were held in a couple of Indian states, and the ultra-nationalist right-wing BJP did not do very well in those state elections. So it's not like the BJP will have a clean sweep in 2019 when elections are held in the country. General election. Right?
Yeah.
So yes, we are seeing majoritarianism in India. We are seeing centralization in India. We are seeing the growth of right-wing politics, but we are also seeing legitimate, rational opposition. We are also seeing civil society institutions and groups that are highly critical of that right-wing Pakistan and India, instead of being a thorn in each other's side, should seriously consider the growth of a South Asian confederation that would be an economic power, that would be a political power, that would be a military power, if the two nation states are able to negotiate with each other.
Yeah. You know what solution you discuss in the end? Of course, this is one viable way to go, but knowing the world, the post-truth era where the superpowers are not caring about their democratic credentials, it is very difficult to accept that India would come out and do that. Second thing is that about internal dialogue, the Kashmir which generates electricity, most of them is not put in Kashmir, but it is sent to India. I mean, of course, there are a lot of internal issues also.
The Kashmir conflict or imbroglio must be seen as a human issue, not a territorial issue. I think both India and Pakistan have been guilty of reducing Kashmir to the Indus Waters Treaty issue. And they have also been guilty of reducing Kashmir to a territorial issue. The Kashmir Valley, in particular, since 1989, has been a battlefield for the proxy war that India and Pakistan have been fighting with each other. They have been using their militaries, they have been using militia groups, they have been using vigilante groups. Both countries give a large portion of their budgets to their respective militaries, to their respective defense institutions. So they need to fight their own battles without using their civilian populations to fight those battles for them, without using their civilian populations as cannon fodder.
Of course.
You see? And there are some laws in Kashmir that were implemented when armed insurgency erupted in 1989, those laws have created a culture of impunity in Kashmir. And there is a culture of impunity in Pakistan as well, vis-a-vis Kashmir.
Yeah. Yeah.
So laws must be revised, and the Pakistani military, as well as Pakistani political establishment, from time to time, in order to divert attention from domestic problems, will use the rhetoric of jihad to whip up frenzy or emotions regarding Kashmir. That rhetoric of jihad, Misbah, is highly destructive and highly damaging. Because the political movement in Kashmir began in 1931. It did not begin in 1989.
That is true.
The political movement in Kashmir, which began in 1931, was a nationalist movement. It was a movement that recognized the growth of indigenous nationalism, that recognized the growth of a collective political identity, and it was a movement that recognized the aspirations of the Kashmiri people as political, not religious.
Yes.
So it is very important, even for organizations in Kashmir, for separatist organizations as well as mainstream political organizations, to draw a line of demarcation between politics and religion, between state and religion. When politics and religion get conflated in the Kashmir movement, that sends a wrong message to the international community. Then the international community clubs the trouble in Kashmir with right-wing Muslim extremism in the Middle East. And that is highly problematic.
Sure. So
in order to avoid that distortion, we require a separation of politics and religion.
Of course.
Kashmir is not only for Muslims. Jammu and Kashmir comprises the Hindus of Jammu, it comprises the Buddhists of Ladakh, it comprises the Sardars or Sikhs of Baramulla. We have a small Christian minority as well. So we need to retain our inclusive character, our pluralistic character, and our politics must remain inclusive.
Great. So thank you very much, Dr. Khan. It was a very nice conversation with you. So ladies and gentlemen, that was our show for this week. Keep watching Viewpoint from Overseas. I am your host, Misbah Azam.